All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome to this interview with Katharina Clasen. I'm Marianne Bernasconi, and actually I'm exploring tools and mindsets that can help cities and companies regenerate their living world. So we're going to spend some time with Katharina Clasen, who is a UX designer and who has been working on the topic of life-centered design in the past few years. So just if you want to say a few words, Katharina, please, welcome.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Yes, exactly. I'm a UX designer. I'm a freelance UX designer. And I have been exploring the concept of life-centered design, I think, for the past 4 years. And with that, actually, I'm still myself on a learning track, more or less. So I'm trying to find out what it means for my life, but especially for my practice as a UX designer and how I can bring the mindset to UX design. And with doing that, I am also trying to do some non-profit work to also help other people out as well with the same goal. So I created a resource hub called lifecenterdesign.net, where people can find resources, where I actually categorize those resources. And I also co-founded a working group inside a German nonprofit. So we have a nonprofit organization for UX professionals. It's called German UPA. And there we have a lot of really cool working groups. And we co-founded, actually me and Olga Lange co-founded a working group there for design for sustainability. And so I have like a couple of smaller projects, and we also co-founded a collective called Life-Centered Design Collective to explore life-centered design, promote its principles, and also like just talk to other people, learn from others, and yeah, keep learning myself.
Nice. So many projects you're launching at the same time. And I was curious, what led you actually to UX design? Before we dig deeper into life-centered design, firstly, what is something that you really like about UX design?
That's a good question, Marianne. So like practically speaking, I got in touch with UX design when studying information design. So it was part of what I studied. But actually, information design is you can take different directions and you can focus on different things. And I think why I was attracted to user experience design is yeah, it's actually probably part of who I am and part of my nature, because I'm first of all I'm interested in a lot of different things. That was already the case when I was at school. I had difficulties to like decide for one focus, so I just like basically did everything. It's still probably the reason why I do so many projects. And I was really interested in art for on the one side, but also science. So those were my two passions. And when I finished school, I was thinking to study art, because actually it's a bit embarrassing, but back then I didn't know that there is something like design and usability and user experience. I didn't know all of that. So I thought there is just art or science, and I had those two passions. And so what I did is I started studying technical biology, because with that I was able to explore chemistry, biology, physics, and mathematics, and so on. So it was really broad, but I realized it was not for me. And then I got in touch with this study, information design, and there again it was a really broad study, like I said before, but with UX design in particular, I can combine all of those passions and interests of mine, and my like really analytical thinking, and I think I can see systems and understand and grasp systems and like rules really quickly, and I can combine this with my passion for art And yeah, so now I design for humans that have where it's about psychology and biology as well. And that was just, I think a lucky lucky finding, more or less, to come across UX design. And that's how I fell in love with the UX design, and I still am in love with UX design, even though I now explore life-centered design.
And just to stay a few more minutes on UX design, what is a typical project that you really enjoy doing as a UX designer?
Yeah, I like your questions. Yeah. So I think it depends. I enjoy different aspects of projects. I really enjoy just like without thinking, working on a UI, for example. I enjoy creating design system. I'm a really I am someone who likes order a lot. At my home, everywhere, I like to organize, optimize everything. So it sounds really dumb, but I actually enjoy this part as well. Like really just sitting here, having silence, being by myself. Maybe it's still even dark because it's in the early morning. Having a coffee and just like working on a UI, making it usable, beautiful, having it really neat. I enjoy that a lot. This is one aspect, but I also enjoy a lot the human and the strategic part of my work as well. So I need to understand the needs of the people that I design for, and that's sometimes not as easy as it sounds, because sometimes they are not like directly in touch with you can ask them, and I think it's important to talk to the users, but sometimes they can't even tell you what they really need. So you need to spend a lot of time with them, do observations. For example, next Monday again, I will facilitate a workshop again, a regular workshop with users, where we like just talk openly, in a good mood, talk about their work, just have a nice chat about their work. And I think if we do this regularly, and the trust will build up more and more, we will get closer to how they really work and what they really need. So this aspect about finding hacks and methods to get to what people actually need, observation, critical thinking, strategic thinking, I enjoy this a lot as well. And I think for me it's the combination, and I'm happy that I can combine all of this in my work as a freelance UX designer, that I enjoy so much about my work.
So we're talking a lot about users and humans, and in life-centered design, one of the aspects is that we are shifting from only human to something wider. So what is your definition of life-centered design? And second question, why did you start being interested in this new topic?
Mm-hmm. So there is of course no official definition of life-centered design, at least not yet. That's a pity. I think it's easier if there is, like, for example, for human-centered design or UX design, you can look at the ISO norm, and then you can look up the definition. But for me, life-centered design is an evolving mindset or thinking. It's not a method. It is not like or a set of methods. It's also not a framework. I think it's just a new way of thinking in design, where you try to consider the needs of all life. And also, I think the other part is to consider a longer time frame when you design products. So for me, those are maybe the two aspects of life-centered design: to consider really all actors in a system, and a longer time frame. Yeah. And I think you had another question.
Yes. So why? Because
Why?
you have UX design is already very wide. I understand you like many different types of topics. So why did you add another one, and what let you do all those side projects with life-centered design when I know that you were already very busy?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm passionate about UX design. I'm in love with my job. I enjoy it, like just from a really egoistic perspective. I enjoy it a lot. It gives me pleasure, and yeah. But there was not. It was not a point. Like it was a time where I felt worse and worse about how I use my time and talents, and I felt like, I mean, UX design, it didn't feel like something bad for me. Never. I mean, I can choose what I do with this power, but it felt not, looking into the future, it felt not relevant and important enough for what problems we are facing in the future. It felt like, okay, at least, I mean, the things we talk about, and we, like, back then when I had this feeling in 2018, or I think, or 2017, back then we were talking a lot about how can we like attract users more and funnels, and I was never like happy with all of those conversations, and how can we like hook them and so on. And then a podcast episode, I listen to podcasts a lot, and I have always, I think since the beginning of podcasts, listened to podcasts, and so they were an important part of my life already. And then a podcast episode entered my inbox. It was in the podcast Mixed Methods, which I like a lot. I think there are no new episodes anymore, but the episode, I think, was called Our Future is Life Centered, and it was an interview with Jane Fulton Suri from IDEO. And I heard this term life-centered design, and of course I was coming from human-centered design, which, if you look at the term and how we practice human-centered design, really is focused on human needs. But if you look at the norm, you will see that it also is about sustainability as per its definition. But the way we practice it, and like I said before, what you were reading back then and what everybody was caring about was like more about economic or company needs, and maybe a little bit about human needs, but not so much about the needs of all life. So hearing that term, I was intrigued immediately, and I thought like, okay, why didn't I hear about this before, and is that a thing? And I was trying to research it, and it was really difficult. I didn't find a lot about life-centered design, and I was a bit frustrated because first I was so motivated and happy to hear it, and then I didn't find anything about it. So I started talking about life-centered design a little bit myself, where I started like using this term. And back then I was still active on Instagram. I had, for my feeling, quite a lot of followers back then. And so I just talked about that I like this term, and that I want to explore it. And the people who followed me, which are mostly designers, they felt the same. They got the same reaction to that term. So they were really interested. But like I said, there was not so much I could share with them. I couldn't provide them any resources. So that was a bit frustrating. And so one day I just wrote a really, really bad blog post. I can say that myself. It was, I just sat down, I wrote it in, I don't know, 15 minutes, and I just published it. There are so many errors in it. You can still see them. You can look at the blog post. It's really not good. But someone told me that it ranked really good. I saw the term life-centered design. Of course, there was no content. Of course, it ranked really high. And then I think the same year there was a trend report as well, and then it, like, life-centered design started to get more traction. Maybe because of this podcast episode, I don't know, but or maybe also because of this trend report by Fjord, I think. And so that shifted everything, because then people started exploring it. And now if you look up life-centered design, you will find a lot of resources. And of course, like I said before, I also tried to be a help with sharing resources. I don't know, Marianne, maybe I will stop talking and
No,
and
okay,
you just
it's perfect.
have.
Actually, you're going exactly
I
in the
was like,
direction. You're in the
I'm so
right
sorry I
direction.
took. Okay, very good. I mean, I was like, I think I jumped from one topic to the next.
It's
So I thought
perfect.
maybe I just stop and you can ask what you
Yes,
wanted to know.
actually, so I was going to ask you about this. So you realize that so many people wanted to know more about it, and what I found really interesting is that lifecentered.net, where you start lifecentereddesign.net, where you decided to curate resources and make it open. So what is it exactly, and who contributes to this website that you created?
Yeah. So I sometimes just call it a hub of resources. So back then I started to collect, like in my frustration, I started to collect resources, of course, that are not all like specifically about life-centered design, because there was not so many resources, but things where I thought maybe this would help me with my goal to get deeper into the principles or mindset behind life-centered design. So I collected them for myself, and then I decided I wanna share this. I wanna do something about it. I thought about creating a community, because I think besides the aspect of information, the aspect of community and sharing with each other is another important aspect. But I didn't, because I was afraid. So I focused on like silently, just without spotlight on any person, but just putting the spotlight on the information to just launch this hub. And my husband, he's a software developer. He immediately agreed to help me regarding the technical part. So I collected the resources. I put them in now I missed the English term, but
Yeah.
a data,
Okay.
no, yeah, Datenbank in German.
In the
Yeah,
database.
database, exactly. Yeah, I put all of them in a database. We started first with one system, then we moved it to a different system, and so it was a co-effort together with my husband. He did the technical part, and I did the design concept and the collection of the content. And yeah, and now I'm still trying to collect new resources every month, and I'm also publishing a newsletter where I highlight other people as well. So every month there is another person in the newsletter with their recommendations. And yeah,
So
that's
that
how I'm working
sounds,
on it.
yeah, that's actually amazing, because we need people like you who start to help others navigate and explore better this new emerging trend. And with your experience, what are the most important tools that we need to know if you want to start a life-centered design approach?
So I think it depends a little bit. So if I focus maybe on the UX design perspective, because that's so I'm closest to the UX design perspective, of course. And if I do so, I try to look at the impact that my work has. And as a UX designer, I mostly work on digital products. I think that's the case for many UX designers, and maybe this is also interesting for your listeners. So what I want to do is I want to look at the impact of digital products, basically. And if we do so, we can see that there are direct impacts and indirect impacts. So digital products directly impact, for example, the environment due to their production, but also usage. So for example, using a digital product, some people maybe still don't realize it, but it uses up a lot of resources and energy, and this has a huge impact on the environment, of course. So this is the direct impact that we can affect as UX designers, like simply by just like choosing technology and content with the usage of energy in mind. Regarding tools, I think what you can do if as a UX designer, if you say, okay, I want to reduce the direct impact of a digital product, I think you can, for example, look at the energy usage at every stage of a user journey map or customer journey map. And this is a tool that you are already used to, that maybe your company already trusts in. So I think it's really good to take these tools that you already apply and where you don't have to convince someone and just like build on them. And this is, for example, one tool where you can do that. And then I think there is the other side, the indirect impact or the indirect impact of digital devices, which I think are maybe even more important to look at. The direct impact is always negative. You can only like reduce how negative it is. And that's, I think, the goal. But indirect impact can be positive and negative. Yeah. So a digital device impacts human behavior, for example, and then this human behavior has an environmental or social impact. And of course, they also have a lot of other social impacts. And
examples?
Yeah, example for, if you look at, for example, information design, you can create information that will help users decide, make better decisions. For example, if I've worked a lot on smart home apps, and there it's always the goal to give the users like the power to know how much energy they consume with their behavior, basically. And only by showing them this information and giving them this power and information, they can change their behavior themselves. And this is one example. But of course, there's also something called digital nudging. It's a bit like sometimes I think you need to be careful about how to apply it, but you can also think about what is the default that the user in a digital product chooses. And this can be, and if you make the behavior, the default that will result in less, for example, energy uses, or that will result in another positive outcome for the environment. It's I think always the way to go about it. But another example, I think, that is also something that everybody can relate to is about replacing unsustainable behaviors, like, for example, traveling, with a more sustainable digital solution, for example, a video call.
Yeah.
So instead of like having both of us, you, I think, are in France, travel miles to have this conversation, we are just doing it with a video call. And this is an alternative that will have a positive result.
So I understand that the impacts are really important as a tool to make it, to improve them. And this is also a topic that we know from sustainability and sustainable design. So for you, what would be the difference between sustainable design and having all the planetary limits in mind, and the impact, reducing impacts? So what would be the difference with that and with life-centered design? What makes it unique and different about which we have been talking about the last 20 or 30 years?
So to answer this like fully and correctly, I think I would have to know like what you compare it to. But I think in the end, there are probably a lot of terms that will say more or less the same thing, or I think that will be, if applied, create more or less the same outcome. You know, some people like to call what I call life-centered design in regards to UX. They call it sustainable UX. Or like I said, I co-founded a working group called Design for Sustainability. That's just a term we chose. I think there will be a lot of commonalities, and I think for me that's okay. At the end, why I like the term life-centered design is that it immediately gives you an understanding of what you are talking about, and you will immediately have an image in your head. I think that's really good regarding this term. Also, what I wanted to add, because you were saying that just now about the impacts and you were asking for tools. So there are a lot of tools, whether you say they are human-centered tools or life-centered or sustainable UX tools, regarding looking at impacts. And this is really an important thing, I think, and something that we probably missed a lot in the past years. For example, there is the impact ripple canvas. You can find it in the book by Martin Tomic, Design. I have to look. Design, Think, Make, Break, Repeat. He's actually currently writing on a new book. And there is also a framework called, I think, the Sustainability Canvas by Clemens Lutsch. And both of those tools help you look at indirect impacts. I think there's also a tool by Damien Lutz. So I want to highlight also, that's really important for me, because I have like this hub, lifecentereddesign.net, but actually this is just like a collection of really awesome work that people are doing. And there are, for example, there's Jeroen Spolstra that you also talk to, who does a lot of very important work with his life-centered design school. There is, like I said, Damien Lutz with, he just launched a new site. I think it's worth it to look at it, lifecentered.design. There is Martin Tomic with his awesome books. There is Estella Durhat. There is, for example, Thorsten Jonas, also from Germany, with the Sustainable UX Network. I think you should look at this as well. And Sandy Dehnart, for example, she focuses on sustainable web design, green the web, if you want to look it up. So just wanted to mention also that there are people who are doing, like, spending a lot of time and effort in working on all of these topics. And yeah.
And so thank you so much. I will put on the later in the emails, and then I will share actually every resources that you just said. And I wanted to go back to what defines life-centered design, and what I found really interesting in your approach is the principles. So purposeful, long-term oriented, balanced, holistic, inclusive, inspired by nature. And this, for me, makes it very different than the people, planet, profit. That is just the normal sustainability principle. So I found it wider. You have this inclusive, you have this biomimicry also embedded. So I was wondering, if I was a company who wanted to start a new project or a new strategy, how should I start? Should it be with a tool or a mindset? What would be the beginning of my journey?
That's a good question. So first of all, of course, those principles, they are just like, so I have some principles on my website. That's my understanding of life-centered design, and it will probably shift over time as well. We also have some principles as a collective that we agreed on as a collective on lifecentereddesign.co, I think. Yeah, so what I think I would start with is looking, as a company, is looking at the status quo. So you could, for example, do an exercise where you create a system map. So you just like try to really understand and look at the whole system, because I think today this is the thing that we are missing the most, like considering the whole system and every part. And then I would probably also apply a tool such as the Impact Ripple Canvas to just get an understanding and feeling of what I said before in life-centered design, like who actually are the the life forms and people that we need to consider and maybe forget to consider today, and what are the effects, like the immediate effects, but then also the indirect and long-term effects that we need to look at. So those are probably the things that I would start with. And then from there, you have to decide which tools could be helpful. No, that's a lie. I wanted to say I've never worked with a non-human persona before. I actually did, but only with my students. But so I think there can also be cases where it will be interesting to create a non-human persona. But I think with those tools, like with all tools, they need to be applied for a specific reason. You need to have a specific reason in question, and then you choose the tool. But I think you can start with a system map, maybe impact ripple canvas, or the sustainability strategy canvas by Clemens Lutsch. You can start with that, and then from there you need to see what tools make sense for you now. I actually, on lifecentereddesign.net, I have a section dedicated only to tools. Maybe that could be a help for people to find some tools.
And just before we close this session, could you share a few words about non-human personas? What are they? How can we use them? And why is it central to life-centered design?
Yeah, I can try. So a persona, of course, is like a representation, or a persona as it is defined and normally used is a representation of a group of people that share the same interests regarding the product that you're working on. And why are we working with personas in design is it helps us empathize with those needs, but it also helps us really grasp and understand like that this dry research data. So real personas are always based on research. If you don't base personas on research that you did before, it's actually not a persona, it's a proto-persona, or a hypothetical persona, whatever you want to call it, but it's not a real persona. So this is really important. And now in some people in life-centered design try to say, okay, so if we use personas to empathize with these groups of people that have an interest in the product, we also have to create this kind of empathy tool for other life forms that have an interest or are affected by the product. So and then it's more or less the same thing for me. So the first thing that you need to do is like do research. Of course, now with a non-human life, you can't ask them. So you have to find people that can tell you as much as possible about this life form to get really good data. And then you can base this persona on this real data. And what is also, I think, important about a normal persona is to always create it in the context of a specific question or specific context regarding what you are working on. So if I would create a non-human persona, I would have the same goal. So I would first start with a question, like if I did, for example, a system map before, or looked at the current journey, and I realized, okay, there is a problem, I would, or I have a touch point to this non-human life form, I would create it with that specific question in mind. Yeah, and I think if you don't do this well and don't choose the non-human persona well, at least that's the experience I did with my students, it sometimes will not be of a lot of help, and it's really difficult to choose it well. So you first need to understand where you affect and how you affect these life forms. Yeah.
Really interesting to see that it's just not about bringing in any non-human persona, which could be, as in Jeroen Spolstra's case, a lake, a mountain. It can be also a bat, as I saw in another project. Like, how can you make public lighting expat friendly. So in all those cases, the question is, why do we bring them in the design, and what is the limits to it? Why are they relevant? So thank you so much for all this valuable input to help us better understand life-centered design. And just final question, what would be your recommendation to anyone getting interested in this topic?
I think probably the first thing maybe I would do is probably just reflect on how you feel today with what you are doing, what you spend your time on and with. I think sometimes it's also about just choosing the right people to work for and with. Maybe you feel like you need to need to change the company you work at, and it feels overwhelming and you just stop there and do nothing. If you are really unhappy with the company you work for with, it can also be an option to find another job where you find happy, and there you will see it's way easier to apply these principles there, and maybe you can learn a lot about them there as well. Yeah, so I think reflection is always good. And then yeah, I think every little step means something. For me, I'm sometimes unhappy about what I do. I always feel like I never do enough, but then again, I sometimes also tell myself, and I think it's really true, that everything you do counts. So if you like just read something about this topic and then talk to someone about it, it can have a ripple effect and a huge effect. So everything counts. And I think it's good to think about this in the context of your professional work and not only your private life, because in my private life, I always feel a bit unhappy. But then I think it's so important to get life-centered design principles, sustainability principles into your work life as well.
Thank you very much, Katharina, and we'll stop here.